So have you tried capturing steam in your food photos before? Admittedly, it's a tricky thing. And so today I'm going to share with you some of my top tips. So hopefully you can have some success when you're shooting steam and smoke. What's shakin' bacon? I'm Joni Simon. Welcome to my studio. This is where I do food photography, and the goal here is to improve your food photography skills so you feel confident behind the camera. And today we're going to play with some steam. I've got these little dumplings going on here in this soup, and I'm going to show you how I get this little happy wisp of steam coming up off the bowl. So very first thing when I know I'm setting up a scene that I'm going to capture some steam or some smoke is to make sure I'm selecting a dark enough background. Something's going to create contrast, because smoke and steam, they're both white. And so if we're trying to photograph steam on a white background, like, it's not going to be visible. We need that contrast. So I have pulled out like this dark blue and this dark black surface here. You could do grays, you could do different colors, but just knowing that the darker it is, the more contrast you're going to get and the more visible that steam will be. So the number two is thinking about our camera settings. And the very first place that I always start when it comes to camera settings is my aperture, no matter what I'm shooting. And if you're not familiar with aperture and your camera settings, I've got a helpful playlist linked down below. But we want to make sure when we're setting our aperture that we've got a wide enough depth of field. Now, this is usually based on our subject. So for these little dumplings, I want enough depth of field that I can see the dumpling in focus, but I do want some soft bouquet in the background going on. But we want to make sure not to go too narrow, because think about the steam as it's rising. It kind of takes up a pretty wide depth there. And so in order for us to get that really nice, crisp, sharp look to our steam, we want to make sure to have enough depth of field. And then thinking about our shutter speed, if you're shooting with a continuous light source or with natural light, you're going to want a fast enough shutter speed in order to freeze that motion. Again, going back to the principle of shutter speed. But in this case, I am shooting with flash. And if you're familiar with flash and how that works, we're going to shoot at our sync speed in terms of our camera's maximum sync speed, and then we're going to rely on that flash to freeze the action for us. If you want to learn more about flash photography and artificial lighting, I've got my Artificial Academy course, and it's linked down below. So we've got the dark background for creating contrast. We're considering our camera settings, what's going to be appropriate in terms of depth of field and the speed in order to freeze our steam. But then most importantly, and where things can really like make or break a steam shot, is all about your lighting. But before we get into the lighting, I'm excited to share with you that today's video is sponsored by the Professional Photographers of America. Now, if you've spent any amount of time on this channel, you know that I am a huge advocate for, fan of, and member of the PPA. And the reason that I very first joined several years ago was in order to get the membership benefit of $15,000 worth of equipment insurance. Like, to me, that was a no-brainer. And yeah, they have all these other great benefits, but it was all about the insurance for me, because I was expanding my gear, I was becoming a professional photographer, and I wanted to know that if something, God forbid, happened to my equipment, that it would be covered. But I'm super excited to tell you that that equipment insurance is getting even better. That effective as of May 1st, they offer full replacement coverage with a flat $350 deductible, or you can repair your equipment with a flat $50 deductible. So it was already an amazing deal. Now it's just that much better. To me, this is invaluable peace of mind, knowing that the most important tools in your business are covered and accounted for, that you've got a full replacement coverage policy in place, in addition to their data recovery services and awesome education. There's so much that they offer, also contracts, business resources, the list goes on. And as I'm thinking about it, the price of an insurance policy and a contract, that just those two things alone would cost you more than the membership, which, good news, you can also pay on a monthly basis. So go ahead and look at the link in the description box below and use the code for a special discount on your membership. Whether you are just beginning and want to start out on the right foot, or you've been at this a while and you just want to take your business to the next level, the PPA is where you need to be. So again, check out the link in the description box below for a code to get a special discount discount on your membership. Thanks again to the PPA for sponsoring this video. So now let's talk about the lights. So there's two things that I keep in mind as I'm making decisions around the lighting for capturing steam or smoke. And admittedly, smoke is easier because smoke, it's a little thicker, it's a bit more visible, it's also a bit more defined in terms of the patterns that it creates. So if you're just getting started with this and you want something a little bit easier, start with smoke and then, work your way up to steam. Steam's a little bit more elusive. But number one is that a harder light source, something with a bit more contrast, is going to help to define that smoke or that steam, make it more visible in contrast to the background. So when we talk about hard light, we're talking about smaller light sources. So if we're working with natural light or window, going for a smaller window or using curtains or drapes, things that we would maybe employ in shooting low-key food photography, dark food photography, which I've got a video about linked down below. But that's not to say you can't capture steam with a softer light source. It's just going to give you a bit more contrast to make it a little more readily visible, easier to work with, especially if you have kind of a softer, wispier steam versus you think about the difference of in this case, I've got these dumplings and I'm just pouring a little bit of the broth on top to get some of that steam to rise up. That's going to dissipate pretty quickly and it's not going to be like this massive flood of steam, as opposed to opening up a pot that's been boiling on the stove or a kettle, as the steam is coming out of the kettle, those have just a lot more vapors. There's a lot more liquid there, a lot more steam for us to be able to see. So if you've got sort of more of this softer, nuanced situation where it's not maybe as intense of a stream of steam, then you might want to work with a smaller light source that's going to create more contrast. So as I was setting up the lighting for this scene, me and my artificial light, obviously that's what I ended up with here. Just love the control, specifically with flash. And in situations like this, where again, we're freezing that action, I can kill the ambient light to get that nice dark atmosphere. But I was thinking, okay, well, what is the most important part of this image? And to me, that's the dumpling. The dumpling is the hero of the shot. It's not the steam. The steam in this equation is the supporting cast member. Now, there's plenty of situations where maybe the steam is what's most important. Think about a tea kettle on the stove, that it's really all about that magical steam, in which case we would prioritize the lighting based on the steam. So I was thinking, well, I could do a 2-light setup where I really have an intense hard light, maybe a 7-inch reflector with a grid on it, just pointed at where the steam's gonna happen. And then I light the rest of the scene with a larger softbox. I was thinking through different scenarios, but I thought, I think what I'm gonna do is go with a 1-light setup, because I really love 1-light setups here on YouTube, because I think it just goes to show you don't need a ton of crazy gear. 1 light can get you pretty darn far in this industry. And so utilizing then a strip softbox, which is going to give us a narrow spread of light. It's going to prevent the light from hitting the background so that I get that nice contrast of the dark background and the light steam, but that it's also going to provide a nice bit of softness then falling on those dumplings to make the dumplings look beautiful. I didn't want a hard light source, an intensely hard light source, something super small hitting those dumplings, because they're just so pretty. I want a little bit of softness there. And so this 1 foot by 2 foot Westcott strip softbox is what I ended up using. So then the second thing, most important thing, in my opinion, in order to successfully capture steam, has everything to do with the position of the light. That we want to make sure to position the light in such a way so that it is shining through the steam, kind of at an angle, so that it is then bouncing off that steam and reflecting into the camera so that we can visibly see it. And so that position for me is what I call that 3/4 back angle. It's behind the subject, it's behind the scene, shining through the steam, but not directly behind, not full on backlighting, just kind of in the corner. Now, if you were to position the light at the side, you really wouldn't see as much of the steam. It doesn't reflect in the same way as shining the light through the steam. So it's all about that position. So once we've got our camera settings, we've got our lighting, everything set up, then it's a matter of introducing the steam. And like I mentioned, different subjects will steam differently than others. So you're gonna have to kind of maybe run some experiments and see how it is, what you're planning to do, how it's gonna produce steam and what's gonna work the best. Now in this situation, again, I'm not getting a ton of steam coming coming up because there's not necessarily like a ton of liquid. And what I did is I took my broth and I took it over to the microwave and got it up to a nice rolling boil, covered it up with a towel, brought it in, and then poured it, and then captured what I could of the steam. Now, very important first thing, because chances are when capturing steam, you may want to then get into the world of compositing, where we're taking multiple different images and combining them together. But before we start to pour broth all over this bowl and, shift around all these dumplings and the vegetables that I admittedly painstakingly placed in there so that they were like just the right position, just the right angle, catching the light the way I wanted, right? We start to pour something on that and it's all going to shift and move. So I took a shot of the scene like in its perfect, like what I want that final image to look like in terms of the food itself. So then I knew that if I didn't get the steam the way I wanted it the first time, I could then take multiple attempts and then just combine the images, which is what I ended up doing in Photoshop. Now, if this is your first time capturing steam or smoke, like I'm gonna recommend you don't go for like a fully styled dish. This is always my recommendation when you're trying a new technique, something you haven't done before. Like, don't put that added pressure of like this beautifully perfect food and then like trying something new with it. Just experiment, like pouring, hot water into a coffee cup, or just, again, light a match and blow it out and just watch the smoke go up. Don't make it super complicated. Give yourself plenty of time and plenty of opportunities to experiment. But so I took some of the broth and I microwaved it so it was screaming hot, rolling boil, and then I poured it into the scene, but I just wasn't getting enough volume of steam. Like, you can have the lighting right, you can have the scenario, everything set up right, but like that subject itself just isn't a steamer. So in which case, what you can do is cheat it a little bit, which I did. So you may have heard this trick before. Food stylists notorious for taking tampons or sponges. In this case, I just took a bunch of cotton balls, put them in the broth, microwaved that. It feels very weird to microwave cotton balls in a broth. You're like, is this my life? Yes. So I microwaved that again until it was screaming hot, and then just added the cotton balls on top, which clearly then ruined the dumplings, but I already had the dumpling shot. I knew I was good. And so then at that point, it was just a matter of taking multiple shots until I got a perfect kind of curl of the steam and the look that I was going for. But so now you can see here in Photoshop, I've got that final image of the dumplings looking their best. And then I take that image that has the steam that I like the best, and I go ahead and add that on top of it, add a layer mask, and then just paint that steam in. Looks very natural, looks very believable. Sometimes people will place, the tampons or the cotton or the sponges or whatnot, like behind the subject, but to me, that's a dead giveaway because you see that the source of that steam is coming from behind the subject. So that's why I like to just physically put it right from where you want it to be coming from, which may ruin your dish. But again, just make sure to always get that one shot of the food looking its best. But so there it is, all my secrets, at least when it comes to photographing steam and smoke. Hopefully this has got you excited to go try out some shots of your own. If you do, feel free to share them over on Instagram. I'm at The Bite Shot. Can't wait to see what you're working on. But with that, I hope you have a fantastic day. Stay out of trouble, and I'll see you soon, all right? Bye.